Located in the peaceful valley of the Wapsipinicon River in Jones County, to the northeast of Cedar Rapids, Stone City is largely a product of the rapid westward expansion of the railroads in the middle of the 19th century. Limestone from its quarries provided roadbed ballast and bridge piling stones for at least one rail line all across the state from the Mississippi to the Missouri River. Today, Stone City, with fewer than 100 residents, is a tiny community of striking contrasts. Its solid stone buildings suggest a permanence and a sense of belonging to the valley itself, which in a sense they do, since they were built with stone taken from the local quarries. The predominant sights and sounds are those of nature in a harmonious relationship with the tiny community. Cows in the green pastures, the babbling of the Wapsipinicon, wild flowers, and grass which grows even under the wheels of the lone train that passes lazily twice a week. Stone City is also an active and sometimes noisy community by day. The din of heavy machinery occasionally echoing through the valley tells the visitor that the town's peaceful appearance is deceptive. Limestone is still being taken from the surrounding hills, although the quarrying itself has been moved underground into mines that resemble enormous honeycombs. On weekdays, Stone City often sounds like a bustling industrial community, and although much of the activity is unseen, the results are evident as truckload upon truckload of rock lumbers slowly up the steep grades leading out of the valley. In the evening and on weekends, the community again settles down to the sounds of crickets and wind in the trees. This contrast between frenetic activity and natural tranquility has always been an integral part of Stone City's identity. And throughout its history, men have been attracted to this little valley precisely because of the economic prosperity offered by the quarrying industry, as well as the aesthetic beauty offered by the peaceful rural environment. Not long after the purchase of the Louisiana Territory, settlers began to move westward across the Mississippi River into the rolling land of what is now eastern Iowa. The Army first quarried stone from the banks of the Wapsipinicon for use along the military road between Dubuque and Iowa City. By the early 1850s, several men had set up small, independent quarrying operations, using horses and wagons to haul the large limestone blocks out of the valley. But it was the railroad replacing the horse and wagon that brought the first real prosperity to the area. By 1870, the quarry industry began to boom along the Wapsipinicon. Henry Dearborn was the first quarry owner to use the railroad extensively to expand his operations, which were located on the north side of the river. He was quickly followed by John A. Green, a young and flamboyant entrepreneur who opened his Champion Quarry No. 1 on the south side of the Wapsipinicon. Finally, several years later, John Ronan became the third of the three major quarry owners when he began working on another quarry on the north bank of the river. With the exception of the railroad, which made transporting the stone much more efficient, quarrying methods changed very little in Stone City from the mid-19th to the mid-20th century. Stone was usually cut into huge blocks by men using crude rods called drop drills. The blocks were then loaded onto flat cars by means of horse-powered, stiff-legged derricks. Rail sidings would be constructed right up to the quarrying site itself, and when one section of the quarry was exhausted, the rails would be picked up and moved wherever needed.
Let's say the 80s and the 90s was the boom time here, and there was one engine never left Stone City. They had a coal hopper and a water tower over here, and one engine just stayed here and did all the switching, and the other engine would come from Marion in the morning with an empty train, pick up the men from Springville, Viola, and along the line, bring them down to go to work. And through the day, the two engines would switch cars and make up a train. And at the end of the day, that train would go back and take the help back and take a train load of stone out of here.
This map illustrates the growth of the land holdings of the three major quarry owners during Stone City's boom years. John A. Green's land is represented by the green coloring, while Henry Dearborn's holdings are shown in red, and John Ronan's in brown. By 1895, the three men held title to most of the land along the Wapsipinicon. As the map suggests, Stone City was very much a company town. That is, its sole reason for existing was to serve the needs of the quarries and the men who worked them. An abiding optimism in the future of the quarry industry prompted the quarry owners to build increasingly larger and more intricate stone structures. Henry Dearborn's blacksmith shop and house were among the first buildings. They were modest and functional to suit his practical and generally conservative outlook. In 1897, Dearborn opened a new general store in the center of the community. The general store remained open for business well into the 1960s. In contrast to Dearborn's practical conservatism was the lavish style of John A. Green. His magnificent stone mansion symbolized his undaunted optimism about the future of the town he's generally thought to have founded. In 1896, he wrote, "Stone City has water sites and is destined to be a large city in the near future. The writer hopes to see it in connection with a vast quarry business, a manufacturing city of magnificent proportions." In addition to the mansion and its several outbuildings, Green built a huge three-story stone barn for the horses that worked in his champion quarries. But his most daring gamble was the construction, in 1893, of Columbia Hall, an immense stone structure containing an opera house, 50-room hotel, and a general store. Named Columbia Hall after the Columbian Exposition of the same year, its stage played host to, among others, Tom Thumb and Jenny Lind. Across the valley from John A. Green's mansion, John Ronan built the last of the rambling stone houses in 1903. But by this time, the fortunes of Stone City had begun to decline. Periodic economic recessions, persistent conflicts with the growing stonecutters' unions, the increased use of Portland cement instead of stone for building purposes, and a failure or inability to use improved technology all combined gradually to put the quarries out of business. Symptomatic of this run of hard luck was John A. Green's public demonstration of new stone processing equipment in 1911. 2 train carloads of spectators came from neighboring communities to witness the demonstration, only to see the new machine destroyed when a miscalculated explosion sent a shower of rocks down upon it. Green's quarrying operations never fully recovered. But Green and other quarrymen, perhaps prophetically, contributed generously to the construction of St. Joseph's Church in 1913, the only building in town designed by a professional architect. The church, in a sense, symbolized the final memorial to the once thriving community and the men that helped build it. By 1920, their dreams of a prosperous community were dead, and the quarries were nearly silent. During the 20s, while Stone City slept, an artist who was born and raised in eastern Iowa was developing a unique style and philosophy of painting that he would one day bring to the small community on the Wapsipinicon. Grant Wood had studied art in Europe, concentrating primarily on French Impressionism, but he gradually came to believe that art was best when it depicted those things which were close to home and the soil. He once said, "I started out to analyze what it was I really knew. I found out. It's Iowa. I realized that all the really good ideas I'd ever had came to me while I was milking a cow." Wood became one of the leading spokesmen for a new wave of indigenous American art. Along with fellow artists Marvin Cohn and Adrian Dornbush and others, he came to Stone City at the height of the Depression in the summer of 1932 to found the Stone City Art Colony. The artist sought to use the tranquil surroundings and the informal structure of the colony to encourage the development of an artistic style that was close to nature. For 2 summers, the artists used John A. Green's mansion as their headquarters, and when attendance exceeded all expectations, a string of old ice wagons was converted into additional housing. The artists took advantage of the unique opportunity to create their own miniature gypsy caravan by decorating the wagons with imaginative designs. The reputation of the art colony grew as other noted American regionalist artists such as John Stuart Curry and Thomas Hart Benton gave their endorsement to the artist community. A few noted newspapers hailed the Stone City experiment as an emerging center of a truly Midwestern style of art. But after its second summer, the colony had to close for lack of operating funds. Stone City once again became quiet. That is, at least until a great gold scandal of 1934. It was claimed that gold had been discovered in the foundation of the old Columbia Hall, which had seriously deteriorated from lack of use. After the initial excitement of the discovery had passed, the entire episode was found to be an elaborate hoax. As if to add insult to injury, Columbia Hall itself, once the pride of Stone City, was dismantled 2 years later in 1936. The 1940s and 50s were quiet years for the small community. The general store remained the only place of business. A couple quarries reopened under the management of William Weber, formerly a Dubuque gunpowder salesman, and the Green Mansion became the summer retreat of the family of noted Iowa poet Paul Engel, who, in a sense, took up the artistic and cultural mantle left behind by the art colony. But in 1963, disaster struck the Green Mansion and ended an era in the history of Stone City.
And we were working over here about 4:30, 4:45, and I turned to my son-in-law, who was we were working together. And I said, boy, the old gal's got a pretty good fire up in the mansion. We looked a little while, and he says, hey, that ain't no chimney. That's coming off of the roof. So we scurried up there, and if we'd have had a garden hose with water, we'd have put the thing out. So we called the fire department, though, and they came out, and I was up there with them. The firemen were way up in the attic, you know, just putting the roof out. The last, boy, it wouldn't have been another 10 minutes, they had it all out. But the hose fell limp. We were out of water.
Today, the face of Stone City is changing. The sound of heavy machinery is prominent during working days, and the quarry business is flourishing once again. The resurgence of industry in Stone City is largely due to one man. William Weber began quarrying here in partnership with another man in 1952. At that time, many of the same techniques used 3/4 of a century before were still being employed. Weber believed that the earlier quarries went out of business because they failed to adapt new technology that would have made quarrying less expensive. Weber made two basic decisions that altered the nature of the quarrying industry in Stone City. First, he decided to use machinery in all phases of the quarrying operation, where his predecessors had instead employed scores of men. Second, he decided he would go underground to mine the best grade building stone. This eliminated the expensive and wasteful practice of stripping off 60 feet of topsoil and inferior stone to reach the high grade dolomite underneath. Starting with a single forklift, Weber gradually expanded his operation. Today, trucks laden with building stone and crushed roadstone rumble in and out of the valley all day. Unlike the boom years from the 1870s to the 1890s, though, when as many as 1,400 men worked in numerous quarries, today fewer than 24 men run the machines that process many tons of stone each day. The stone itself is put to different uses today than it was in the earlier years. No longer are large blocks used as foundation stone for buildings and bridge abutments, but rather decorative facing stone for buildings and, of course, crushed rock for roadway ballast. Heavy trucks now carry the stone where before it was transported from the site by rail. Although quarrying is once again the major focus of Stone City life, never before has the contrast between activity and the quiet environment been so great.
We've had days here when we had as high as 30 trucks hauling out of this quarry in one day. And, I mean, steady, lime trucks and rock trucks. And I'll tell you, it's busy and it's noisy. I sit down here at the cabin in the evening. And such a contrast to the day. Days are noisy. Even coming out of that mine, there's noise coming out of the mine. But in the evening, this is the most peaceful valley I've ever seen. Birds sing. Once in a while you see a deer swim the river. Just beautiful.
By day, Stone City once again bustles with the sounds of activity. But by evening, those sounds give way to the chirping of the crickets, the sound of the wind in the trees, and the babbling of the Wapsipinicon.